introduction to romantic dynamics by Romantipedia, and I'd like to welcome you guys being here today for us to learn a little bit about what this is all about at Romantipedia and what it is that we teach, all about love, and hopefully kind of get you started with some basic principles that you ought to be able to use in your everyday life. Here we go. First off, we have some terminologies that we tend to use. I'll explain those as we go along. The main system surrounding love and human courtship we call romantic dynamics, and I'll get a little bit into why we call it that. And there are some other ideas too, such as Mind OS, a way of looking at your personal growth. It's a system as far as how your conscious mind works, in our view. And the social personality system, which is a system of understanding personality. And these were created between 1999 and 2017. This material isn't meant to be healthcare. It's meant to be essentially philosophy, interesting ideas to kind of spur you to think about the topic of love. We hope you enjoy them. Don't duplicate the material or use it elsewhere, and enjoy it. So why are you here? This is a question worth answering. I have some of the basic common reasons somebody would want to dive into some material about love and learn about love. For one, they may want to learn how to solve a particular relationship problem, a relationship they're already in. They may want to understand something that will help them get a relationship in the first place, or maybe with a particular person that they like, that they haven't successfully gotten involved with yet. They might be coming to this kind of material to get into a new relationship with the right kind of person after having learned some lessons. They think they know more what they want now, or they might be trying to get out of a relationship. Get out of one with someone they've discovered on some level just really isn't right for them, but they don't know how to verbalize that or how to, they want to give themselves an excuse to get out or some kind of proof as to why they are justified in getting out. The truth about that one, of course, is that as adults, so long as you do no harm to other people, you have the right to stay in or get out of whatever relationship you're in. And that concept has to do with what's called personal boundaries. But a lot of people want more than just because as their reason for making a life transition. Some just want to learn about love and get better at it in general. Some people just want to understand love as an aspect of themselves. And little joke that I like to say is that I'm here because of my mother. I've had numerous relationships, failed at most of them, learned a lot of lessons from that, and every time I would have a disappointment when I was very young, my mother used to say, "Oh, you're in love with love. You just love love. You wish love would work out." And I think that's true to this day. And I want it to work out for other people as well as me. To a degree, learning this material is a lot like becoming your own matchmaker in a way. It's learning courtship, a system of courtship. And you see a lot of material out there these days, all the dating apps. You may notice that a lot of them aren't of the highest quality in terms of the people you meet, but there's a lot of people to meet. Some people have thought that's a reasonable substitute for in-person socializing, say somebody who lives very rurally. But I don't think that just electronic communication with people is a reasonable substitute for live in-person socializing. So I just want to make a point to a large degree, the principles you're going to learn are, yes, they could be used online or communication electronically with others, but they are best used live in person in your social life. Now, there's a glut of information out there on love, at least opinions about love. Everybody has opinions. Plenty of relationship advice out there, maybe from your actual friends or online. But the origin of advice is of unknown origin in most cases, or is generic, maybe not practical, and maybe is just somebody's opinion, something that worked for them and would only work for them rather than for everybody. And I encourage you, when you read articles or search the web, find material out there, that you test it if you're even going to consider it, and see that there's something valid to it. You might check out science articles and find those fascinating and think about how you might be able to apply them in your life. And we love that when people do that. I think that's a good idea. Spur our imaginations based on scientific research that we see posted online. We do a lot of that. We look at a lot of that and find where it correlates with our model here. And I encourage you to do the same, to look to actual science research to be a basis for why you do what you do in love. You may even have gone to couples counseling, and like some people, you may have found it a bit vague in its advice to you, or maybe you just didn't get it, how to use it, or maybe even felt like the person or people you went to didn't get you fully, or maybe you just didn't have enough access or enough time. A lot of people don't like the idea of having to go physically to somebody's office. And even though the internet's evolving in that direction toward being able to help you online, actually clinically, there's still a great chasm to cross for us to reach truly effective online clinical treatment when we're talking about that world, couples counseling. Short of that, there's plenty of material, educational material for us all to learn and try to apply in our own everyday lives. And I think at street level, to quite a degree, that's what many, many people do in the end, because we just don't have time to go get some formal training or help these days. We use little memes and bits of information and see how true they are and how useful they are in our everyday lives. We hope to give you a kind of framework for pegging all the information onto that you encounter in your daily life, that you encounter on the web, on your phone, or on your computer, and have a place to hang the information, almost like a file cabinet composed of 9 file folders, as we're going to see. We're very service driven at Romanopedia. We want to give you high utility. We want to find ways that you feel inspired and find ways that life just flows easier for you, hopefully, because of the new kind of thinking that you might develop when you consider this sort of material. Many of the dating sites out there are kind of backwards. They're less keying in on giving couples advice and more on just getting people together, whether they're a good match for each other or not. So again, we want you to learn how to be your own matchmaker by understanding this material, rather than just sort of hoping that the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain is going to bestow on you, all the right answers on love. We want you to discover your own answers. So you are your own best matchmaker. You're your own best relationship advisor in the end. And you're the one with the high stakes here. Nobody else. We want you to enjoy love, however, not just as a set of scientific principles. We want you to enjoy the discovery process of love. We want you to enjoy the magic of love and the surprise that comes along. And I feel that's very possible too, even if we are to use some principles that have roots in psychology and philosophy. That doesn't dictate that we robotically go about our lives um, uh, looking at love very clinically and over analytically and don't have any surprises or enjoyment of it. Um, we want to correlate with psychology research and science and not opinion, but we also want you to enjoy what amounts to an unfolding story of love in your life too, with all of a story's surprises and drama. As I mentioned philosophy earlier, uh, this material is probably the closest to philosophy, which predates psychology as a field. And it's thinking about thinking. It's the enjoyment of knowledge and thinking about thinking. And we hope that you see the roots of the source material that came into this synthesis, this system for human courtship, and enjoy those bits of source material. There are a lot of philosophers that we make reference to throughout our programs and our processes, and we hope you sort of read further and enjoy at a deeper level the source material. Also, a major feature of romantic dynamics is that there's a lot of personal growth material out there that sees you as an individual and gets you to look at yourself as if you're in a vacuum and try to make changes. But the reality of our personal growth, all of us, is that it's almost always in a social context that we learn the most and discover the most about ourselves. So I think, to an extent, learning about love is personal growth and is learning about life and is about building a life. They can't be separated, really. That's how we learn the most, is through social interaction. So romance itself is your own best personal growth program, and any personal growth you do is going to make you better at love. They can't be separated. So romantic dynamics is both coursework on love, but also the most advanced personal growth program we could come up with in one very comprehensive set of lessons that could take you a long time to get through, which is fine. We have all the time in the world, and you have many years of life to learn and grow in this arena of where philosophy and psychology intertwine. Romantic dynamics isn't a, quote, new psychology or a new science. It's a philosophy and a language you can use. I said earlier, like a file system, a way for you to categorize information you see about love and see where it fits in to a step-by-step process of how we get together. We want to correlate, as I said, with existing science that comes out. There's more and more in recent years than ever before about the subject of love. For some reason, it wasn't able to be as studied as it is today, perhaps because of social media and the internet and technology making it more possible today. But an example of an immediately practical application way of taking actual science research and then putting it into action in your life. A great example is Dr. John Gottman and his work on the Gottman method. There are therapists who do the Gottman method of couples counseling, and I believe his work to be so based in actual research outcomes. It's amazing, stunning material to look at because it's so practical and easy to understand. An example is his 1 in 5 rule in couples communication. You may have heard of this study when it came out, that when couples argue and are critical of each other, for example, if you encounter a couple that never, ever, ever disagrees, part of you maybe in the past has probably, uh, you've probably encountered people like this and thought, gee, there's something wrong there. Do people really never disagree? They're never, ever critical of each other. It makes you wonder if somebody's just sort of biting their lip, so biting their tongue, so to speak, and just shutting up about misgivings that they have. There's something wrong in the communication in the relationship. On the flip side, a couple that's constantly fighting, it's obvious to us, they're going downhill in their relationship. And Gottman actually finds a direct correlation to who's most likely to divorce, or what percentage of people will actually divorce across the spectrum of fighting a lot, disagreeing a lot, and using destructive criticism instead of constructive criticism a lot, as opposed to the other end of the spectrum, never disagreeing at all. And he finds both ends of that spectrum are more likely to divorce. But those who give constructive criticism about 1 in 5 times, and the other times are more complimentary of each other, they stay together. They don't divorce as much as those who either fight a lot or fight not at all. This is really interesting for us on many levels, because it shows these days a lot of the research out there you can actually take and use in practical application, and notice how do you measure up to that research finding. And it also points out that, I think this one particularly, that we all exist on a spectrum. Every relationship is on a spectrum, from something excessive versus something there's not enough of. And every individual person is on a spectrum in every area of their life and every area of their psyche, of too much of something or not enough of something else. And as we get into deeper later in some of our course material, we talk a lot about Aristotle and his concept of what's called the golden mean, which we'll talk about. But that's about how our virtues are on a spectrum, and what is virtuous tends to be balanced and have harmony to it. It's in the middle of a spectrum, and too little of a virtue is obviously a vice. It's not virtuous, and we all think that way. But he goes beyond that, Aristotle does, and he says too much of a virtue can also be a vice. That's fascinating. And we're going to find that throughout the romantic dynamics material. So what we'd encourage you to do is, rather than just being fed thousands of profiles on social media or dating sites, we'd like you to go ahead and use that information source, that social source, but be more thoughtful and mindful in your choices one-on-one, in person with people. And in this way, you'll learn to speak a kind of language of love, of the theory of love, and be able to decode what's happening in your love life and that of others, all without losing the magic of love. We want you to learn your way to the answers, moving away from those who are wrong for you, but then naturally attracting those who are right for you. And everyone in between, the failed relationships along the way won't be lost time or wasted money. They will involve you having grown and learned lessons. You certainly have heard various self-help people of the past tell you that people come your way so that you can learn a lesson from them. Well, that's very true to science too, because every interaction we have with another person is indeed a chance to learn and to become more effective yourself at love and a bigger, better person. So what is romantic dynamics? On one level, it's a system of understanding and analyzing romance by looking at its working parts, at steps of progress, principles we can practice at to improve our love lives. We are animals too, just like the rest of the animal kingdom. And the rest of the animal kingdom, they all have mating rituals. They have step by step processes, a mating dance you've heard of, by which uh, the male and female of any given species filter through the masses to find a most fit mate. And we're talking about procreation, we're talking about literal mating most of the time, having offspring. Human beings, quite a bit more complicated than that, right? Although we do certainly mate and procreate, we have a very big cerebral cortex compared to most other animals and even other mammals. And as a result, we have this rich um, psychological life beyond just the instincts and drives and passions of sex itself and the sex life and the sex act itself. There's way more to us than just mating and procreating, obviously. But romantic dynamics is about that too. We need to borrow from the animal kingdom, though, with the concept that there is a step by step process through which two potential mates discover that someone is right for them and that many, many others are wrong for them. That's what we want to borrow from the rest of the animal kingdom. Romantic dynamics is an evolving, organized body of knowledge on love that has a structure to it, but lots of substance rooted in the source material of philosophy and science, and the philosophy of science, and of psychology, and of a branch of philosophy called linguistics, and simply in drama theory and the concept of storytelling. Um, some early philosophers, not early philosophers, some philosophers of the 1800s, the linguists said that the mind is designed like a language. The mind is designed like a language. And in psychoanalysis, there was a French psychoanalyst named Jacques Lacan that believed that as well. And he looked at the roots of language and how it informs us about the working parts of our minds. This is how the mind becomes a mind, is through the formation of language to the linguists. And so the reason I'm telling you this is because in understanding romantic dynamics, words will be very important. We're going to pay a lot of attention to the meaning of common everyday words that we say and hear, and try to use them as clues to correlate back to the principles of courtship and to the science research about courtship. We'll try to make a connection between words and what they mean and let them inform us what's going on in our romantic lives. Romantic dynamics is also a method of understanding love through making connections between these disciplines, between science, philosophy, and even art and literature. And so we use a lot of the works of the masters, very old paintings, which often were about the big stories of the day, the big dramas of the day, from the ancient Greek myths to Shakespeare. And we even like to come up to the modern day and try to make use of modern films to understand many of these principles. When we see an actor portray a part in a play or in a movie about love, they may be displaying a very sublime, um, perfect version of real life that you may not ever tend to see in everyday real life. But that's beside the point. They may be displaying a principle of love for us to learn a lesson from and measure ourselves by. So some of the modern films by directors such as Mike Nichols or Adrian Lyne, or even some of the comedies like those by Judd Apatow, actually have a ton of lessons for us to learn about all three phases of human courtship through the the very craftsman-like construction of these stories, these really amazing screenplays, these perfect dramatic structures. We have a lot to learn from, because the reason these movies are so popular is because they really strike us as universals. They appeal to all of us, and they can only appeal to all of us if they are speaking to universal features of us. And those things that are universal features of us are going to tend to be correlating with core principles of psychology. And in this study, in principles of love. Okay, that's why movies can be such wonderful teaching tools. Romantic dynamics is a synthesis and an algorithm, like a software program in a way, only it's running on our mind. And it's a system whose symbolism can be put into practical terms. So we're going to use the ancient Greeks, Shakespeare, and modern cinema to help us see symbols of love and use them as a kind of language, an easy to learn and understand language. So romantic dynamics is a science of courtship, a story of love, and its science basis gives us logical, repeatable steps and guidelines to track our progress. Now, we're going to learn to see the phases and steps of courtship as guidelines only, yardsticks for us to measure ourselves by, or waypoints on a map, as if we're using a compass. If you've ever used Google Maps or Apple Maps or one of those map programs, or you've flown on an airplane and seen the map in front of you, there's a thing called waypoints. Those are like temporary stopping places to help chart your progress on a journey. And these are very much like, as we journey through a story, the story may have plot points, points of distinction where the circumstances of the drama change, and we need to respond to those changes. We can take action or no action at all, and our lives might get better or worse because of this. Many of you are familiar with that grand story of them all, story structure, the hero's journey, used in so many movies. And there are waypoints in that story that have been lectured about by all the cinematic theorists and writing teachers out there that are so universal, you see them in every hero story. So it turns out that there are waypoints like that, plot points in human courtship itself that we can expect to come along, and which will challenge us to either respond, rise to the challenge, or fail, or just be passive and not respond at all. And this is when we tend to fail at love or lose at love. Just like a story, certain things are going to be expected to happen in love, and some even must happen for the plot of our love story to progress. The story aspect of love also gives us something miraculous. As I mentioned, we get to be surprised. Even though when we see a preview of a movie, we can kind of guess what's going to happen to a degree, but we go see it anyway because we still want to be surprised by the details. And I believe love to be a lot like that too, that even though we are learning these waypoints, these plot points of love, of which there are 9 big ones, 9 major plot points, that doesn't take away from how the details will play out and how unique and individualistic our personal life story and love story will be, so that we don't know the future. We really don't. We can be surprised by it, but we can be better navigators toward exactly what we do want, and more efficient navigators or narrators of our life story and our love story. So we still keep the magic of love when we're talking about a story. Otherwise, why even go to the movies if you already know the end? So I hope this ends up being an intellectual feast for those of you who love reading, learning, and discussion. It's a science of courtship, a story of love. And it's a way of doing what I think is the most profound personal growth that can be done, which is through relationships. It's socially. Why did I do this? Why did I come up with this material? Well, I saw patterns occurring, and I saw that they correlated with the principles I already knew about psychology. In fact, I thought that a lot of what I saw among other couples and in my own relationships um, filled the gaps between existing theories that I already knew well. And I thought that was something I really had to pursue in my life, to make correlations between all the various psychological theories I had learned about, see how they weave together, and found that by actually directly observing people, that gave me a lot of answers, or at least a lot of clues as to how does this overall process of people finding love really come together. These observations of people and their loves and my own, though, did something more for me. It made me ask questions I might never have otherwise if I had just read a bunch of textbooks about psychology. It caused me to ask new questions to explain the unique situations that I've seen out there. And that has led me to weave together certain scientific principles that I've seen in the research that I wouldn't have otherwise thought to connect to each other. I'll give you a quick example of an observation, just random, that you may have noticed at some point in your life. When people break up, and say it's the man who does break up, and then he suddenly gets buyer's remorse on breaking up. He's the one that instigated it, but then he suddenly regrets his decision. You've certainly have seen that or heard of that or even done that yourself, but you may have not stopped to think, why does that specific thing happen? Why? Is it random? Is it weird or so unique that only a handful of people behave that way? No, it's very common. So I'm curious, why is that? Well, I found that one way of explaining it, or at least learning to recognize it and maybe steer it better or prevent it so that you don't end up having regret, is to see it for what it is. As we will find, a common cause of that effect of buyer's remorse after breaking up, after being the instigator of breaking up, comes from having not had enough attraction in the relationship when testing the other person or being tested. And in other words, not having the other person have enough spine to really put you to the test so that you feel like a winner in winning them over. And so something's missing for you. There's a lack of attraction that occurs in that scenario. And so you feel like breaking up because you just don't feel attracted enough to stay in the relationship. Why get buyer's remorse after breaking up? Because you have just artificially created a test for you to rise to. The other person didn't do it as they should have. You did it by breaking up. Now they're unattainable, and suddenly they're more attractive because they're unattainable. They're unattainable because you broke up. Okay? Just let that digest. See what you think of that as a possible logical explanation why people get buyer's remorse on breaking up. Why did I compose this material? I'm the first to admit I'm an utter failure at love many times over, many times over. But I know love when I see it and feel it. And I think you do too, at a gut level, at an intuitive level. And now I know why I see it and feel it. I know what the principles are for why something failed or succeeded, and what's missing when it is not there, and what's present when love is there. Now, you may be much better at love or relationships than me, and I am quite okay with that. I think I still have something to teach you, and I think I can even say that because the depth of some of my own failures at love, and just like those of you who are like me and having had some stunning failures, we have special insight and experience, at least in what to avoid in bad choices and perhaps what to do differently next time in situations maybe those of you who are good at love have not yet encountered. So there's always something to learn from each other. Um, I also don't consider myself an expert. I'm just a person with a deep curiosity, perhaps like you, about love and what makes it happen. So I'm also a failure at selling things. I'm not very good at that. Um, and so, uh, even though this is an educational, place to get together and there are courses for sale, I'm here out of curiosity more than anything. And when I explain some things, tell you about our different programs and so forth, I may not be the best convincer about how wonderful they are and why you should get them and this sort of thing. But I have spent decades thinking about this and really, from the heart, trying to perfect these principles. So I hope that when you learn them and try them out, that you can, in your own way, get excited about them. Um, Many people, even those closest to me at times, unfortunately, have told me teaching these materials is silly or it's a pipe dream. I ought to just give up. Love is too complicated. And there are, besides, already too many experts out there in the world and plenty of material for people to digest. Why would I want to create any more? There's too much already. And everyone's an expert on everything these days, right? Everyone has a YouTube channel and so forth. And it's too difficult to teach something new to people. They tend to either think you're a wacko or who are you to teach me, or be an expert. Well, I don't think I'm an expert, but I have something to say. And I think you might find it very interesting, or you might get your own ideas that grow out of it. So I would like to collaborate with you. I would like to be excited alongside you in learning about love and how it works. Um, Sometimes these people did get to me. Sometimes I even felt like giving up on teaching this material, but something in me just wouldn't let it go. It was um, too, I think, beautiful, um, and not by my creation. I mean, to look at how things weave together. Like when you look at a painting and you just love the painting, or you go to a great movie and you just feel wonderful after having seen that movie. That's a lot of the time how I feel about science, and how I feel about seeing science actually interweave with drama and storytelling or art. I think it's beautiful and in a way that won't let you go. It won't let your mind go. And so I want you to know I am not a guru. And as I said, I don't consider myself that much of an expert more than anybody else who has read broadly and thought deeply about this subject. So I want us to consider these ideas, come up with new insights perhaps, um, but deal with this problem of love that is so pervasive and deep in our society that almost nothing else in life holds a candle to it in importance to living a good life and versus a life of regret. and disappointment. Let's do something for ourselves about this. So let's dig in. I kept talking about these three phases of love. Romantic dynamics happens in three phases, three areas of the mind. Sexual attraction happens in what evolutionary psychologists call the reptilian brain, the most primitive area of your mind, an area that could also be called the unconscious mind, the reflexes, the instincts, the automatic behavior areas of the brain. And Freud called it the id. So there are a lot of synonyms for this area of the mind we're talking about, the reptilian brain. The unconscious, the id, the reflexes, the instincts, the control center that governs the functioning of the body. So you might say the reptilian brain is about physicality. And yet, just like a software, it can't be exactly located at just one little spot in the brain itself, in the hardware. It's like a code that's running on a computer. It's the primitive code, and it is the principles of our behavior in childhood. It's immature, illogical, childish, childlike, and instinctual. And maybe, often, because it's the unconscious, it's utterly outside of your awareness. This area of the mind, I believe to be the most involved in governing the principles of what we have all called sexual attraction, or um, passion, or desire, or in a more derogatory sense, lust. Desire we tend to think of as more of a positive word. Lust is the more negative version of it, but it's wanting somebody else, possibly for illogical reasons, incomprehensible reasons, feeling a physical sensation about the other person, wanting to be physically close to them. So anytime you use words or hear words that sound physical, right there might be your first clue that we may be talking about the area of the mind called the reptilian brain to evolutionary psychologists, or the id, or the unconscious. You know, have you ever heard? I'll give you an example. Have you ever heard the phrase, "You kill me"? Oh, you're killing me, or "You slay me." Well, that is a very physical word, and it even pertains to life and death. To say "you kill me" or "you slay me," anything pertaining to life and death verbiage, or to the physicality of being alive, probably pertains to the functioning of the reptilian brain. And for our purposes, the functioning of initial attraction to another person, sexual attraction. The second large phase of human courtship, I believe to be emotional attraction, which occurs in the area of the mind that evolutionary psychologists call the mammalian brain, the emotional centers of the brain. Now, this is the place where bonding takes place, friendship, happiness, or unhappiness are felt, and where I believe love actually occurs. And right away, we can see a distinction between love in this area of the brain, or of the mind, as being a different thing from what is sexual or passion-based or about desire. That love and passion are different things. They work well together, but they are different areas of the mind. So that's the mammalian brain and emotional attraction. It's about the emotion of happiness, which has a whole anatomy to it that we're going to learn about. The operative word is self-esteem. Those with high self-esteem are happy. Those who are unhappy likely lack one of what I coin as the two types of self-esteem. They lack self-esteem. They lack one of the types of self-esteem if they're unhappy. So self-esteem is a synonym for happiness and for friendship or love. The final phase of human courtship, and what really sets us apart from other animals, I think, is our large cerebral cortex and what evolutionary psychologists can call the higher brain. And this is where intellectual attraction takes place. Another word for this is commitment. Now, that's a word a lot of women tend to really gravitate toward. A word that some folks might actually use in its place is teamwork. So teamwork or commitment, a lasting relationship, that's this phase of courtship, intellectual attraction, which I believe occurs in the higher brain, talked about by the evolutionary psychologists. Freud might call it the conscious mind, and it might include the ego and superego that Freud talked about, your sense of right and wrong, doing right and wrong, your ethics, and much, much more. All these working parts of the conscious mind are what are involved in intellectual attraction and in the higher brain. Now, it took me quite a number of years to see the direct step-by-step connections between these three areas of love and love story. But I've reached a conclusion that this higher brain area really is the most about reaching goals for a couple, or what we would call success. Now, one of the, I think you'll find interesting things about these principles is that for them to hold weight, hold their own weight, they ought to be applicable across all cultures. They should not be dependent on fads or sociology. They should apply universally across all cultures and even across history. Well, there was a time in history, I'm sure you've heard of, where in medieval times when the royals would wed each other, oftentimes it would be for the purpose of uniting families politically or acquiring land, amassing wealth, and that there really was not that much love involved with marrying, in the Middle Ages by the royals. You've heard that before, I'm sure. Well, guess what? This courtship system accommodates for that in the form of intellectual attraction, which is often where marriages take place, in commitment between a couple, which again is for the purpose of success, not purely for love or for sex or desire. It's for success. So the medieval royals were staying true to science, I think. They were wedding for the right reason to wed, which is for success. Now, the rest of us today, we'd like to get it all. We'd like to have it all with one person. We'd like to have desire and love and friendship and success with them to be capable of being great teammates. So sexual attraction, phase one of courtship, is about desire, lust, sex itself, and is rooted in principles of what form masculinity and femininity. And you're going to find that those principles are something that are independent of your sexual preference or independent of today's sociology. It's about a polarity between people. It's about a difference of style in how one feels passionate. Okay? The masculine person and the feminine person, they have a polarity between each other. Next is emotional attraction, phase two. And this is where love, friendship, and I'd like to say a very important further principle, value happens. And so another practical matter here is that if you've ever wondered, um, how much are you worth to someone you're in a relationship with, or thought about how valuable are they to you in a relationship, this is the area of the mind that's at work. Because, as you will find, we value other people and even objects, things, according to how happy they make us. That's what value is. We buy a product not exactly because of its utility, but because it will make us happy, we think. And perhaps its utility is what makes us happy. But if you ever bought your favorite meal, you may have found that there wasn't a whole lot of utility in it. You may have found it just makes you happy, that you feel good because you treated yourself to your favorite meal. So value is happiness also. So if you are ever in a relationship where you feel unhappy in the relationship or about the relationship, that has something to do with the amount of friendship that you share and the amount of love that you have, and perhaps the amount of self-esteem that you have or the partner has. Finally, phase 3, intellectual attraction. In the cerebral cortex, it's the thing that makes us high animals, where maturity, teamwork, and partnership take place. And this is what helps us successfully get to goals. So it's in this phase that we actually commit to another person, because we have checked them out for teamwork ability with us. How good of a true partner at shooting for goals are they? That's what it's going to be all about. Now, if you look at these 3 phases, they are much like a drama, too. Not just science-based, but it's the structure of a drama: a beginning, a middle, and an end. An Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 of a play. The beginning, middle, and end of a movie. Sexual, emotional, and intellectual attraction are like that. They are the beginning, middle, and end of the love story that we seek. So in other words, let's divide this process of courtship into these 3 phases of a love story and make our way through. In the end, I hope we find better choices and learn the reasons that we get drawn together with each other in desire, happiness, and success as what we want to achieve. So the 3 brains of love. Passion and desire are expressed through the masculinity and femininity of the unconscious reptilian brain. Love and friendship, as well as self-esteem, value, and positive emotions, are similar to what Freud called his subconscious, or the mammalian brain, to the evolutionary psychologists. And finally, commitment, teamwork, and success are achieved through having mature character of the conscious mind in the higher brain. So, since we have these 3 areas of the mind that we're covering, it's great for you to remember whenever you encounter something of interest to you in love, in yourself or in others you see, and ask yourself, is this issue about masculinity, femininity, passion, or desire? Or is it more about the quality of friendship they share and amount of happiness they feel? Or is it more about failure to get to perhaps joint goals that they have? These are 3 separate areas of the mind, 3 separate parts of courtship, and we do need all 3 to feel complete in our romance, but we need to break them apart to analyze them for what they are. So we can't use the right tools on them if we can't divide them out, tease them out into what area of the mind are we talking about. Another important principle I want to introduce early here is the concept of a bell curve. Since we're working with correlation to the science research out there and interpreting it and taking a look at what it might mean, it's important for us to be aware of this concept of bias. And biases are universal. We need to check ourselves for them. And it's part of the reason that um, any use that you yourself want to make of science that you read about out there, um, we all need to be open to opinions about the science and to new interpretations of it so that we're always exploring and always enriching our understanding of it. And that's how science itself works and evolves. A theory is made, it's tested and proven, but then eventually maybe some new evidence comes along to disprove it and create an even better theory. It doesn't mean that the original theory was utterly unuseful or inaccurate or didn't say something true about the way the world works or about how people work. It just meant that the language and the meaning were not as advanced, refined, and useful as they could have been. Quick, easy example. Um, the sun revolves around the earth prior to Copernicus. Well, that's false today. We understand that. But it was indeed an accurate observation that there is a source of heat and light that goes from east to west every day. That's true as an observation. That was useful to know. It was useful to plan what things you can do in daylight versus in the dark. And the creation of calendars and marking time is associated with that. So it doesn't mean that the original theory was not at all useful. It became refined and more advanced once Copernicus discovers the Earth actually revolves around the sun. So we need to check ourselves for bias at all times, and also be open to new, more refined, more accurate interpretations of things that we see and that we learn. So bell curves help us with this in a very specific way. A bell curve will help us take our opinion and our very personal experience and rectify it against a mean or a norm or a universal measure of something. In other words, bell curves help us be able to both work our lives by rules that can be counted on while still, and labeled, while still able to recognize ourselves as unique individuals, that we don't all fall exactly on the mean of anything. In fact, very few people fall exactly on a mean. They distribute in a bell across the mean in a spectrum. So we're back to spectra. We're back to the importance and usefulness of spectra. Okay? It's a quantum concept. Many people have read about quantum physics, and at least at a basic level, you've heard the statement that one summation of quantum physics pertains to how matter can be both particle and wave at the same time. It can be pinpointed in space and have mass, or it can be distributed over a probability spectrum as maybe being here, but maybe being over there. But it's a wave of energy, matter and energy, particles and waves. We've all heard this about quantum physics. Just like many of the early psychologists and philosophers who started learning about psychology, applying physical models to models of the mind can be very useful as metaphors for understanding the principles involved. Why? Because psychology is invisible, but matter is usually visible, and the world of physics is visible. You can see it, hold it in your hand, and we're very sensory and tactile. You know, we have our five senses, and so we're made for being in the physical world. So it's very useful to take physics principles and ask ourselves the question, how does this principle correlate with the workings of the mind and of love? Freud did that a fair amount. He even used terms that are from physics, like drives and forces, okay, or being in conflict, you know. So if there were a quantum psychology, then its features ought to be able to be labeled, like as on a mean of a bell curve, but also allow for individual patterns, differences, and diversity among us, respecting that simultaneously, like having a fingerprint or being a snowflake or being on a spectrum. So labeling a behavior is like a particle from quantum physics, but respecting variation among the masses of people on a spectrum is like the wave principle from quantum physics. Which brings us to our first work of art and the centerpiece of Romantopedia. This is a painting in the London National Gallery, Mars and Venus by Botticelli. And it's a wonderful symbolic painting for looking at some of the principles of love. I won't get deep into it right now, but I'll just throw a few things your way. There's a polarity here. Look at all the opposites. There is male and female. There is masculinity and femininity. There is asleep and awake. Aries, Mars is sleeping. Venus, Aphrodite, is awake. And notice the little creatures, the centaurs, the half animal, half human, little childlike creatures there at play with Ares' sword or Ares' lance and his helmet, his battle gear. He was the god of war. And notice how they're focused on him as he is sleeping, as he is in the unconscious. Well, these centaurs, these little creatures are representative of the unconscious mind, of the human unconscious, and he himself is unconscious. What do we know about that word? It correlates with the reptilian brain. So it correlates with sexual attraction. So within this painting, you might be able to interpret for yourself sexual attraction between the masculine and feminine, in which the masculine is really taken away by the woman, the goddess of beauty, Aphrodite, Venus. And notice the little baton dangling at the end of his fingers, of his left hand. What do you imagine might happen if he gets too deep into his dreams? The baton falls and he awakens. So we see right there, we'll go into it much later, that there's a masculine principle at work there, that baton, that the man who gets too deep under the spell of attraction, maybe, surrendering too much of his destiny to another person. The baton falls, he wakes up. He remembers to check his progress in the love affair here. Okay, just a little symbolism, my interpretation. You ought to look at this painting and see what you discover about it symbolically. London National Gallery. The satyrs. The unconscious, the instinctual animal-like nature of humans, which is the unconscious mind, the instincts. Aphrodite's eyes are wide open. And we'll learn in step 3 of human courtship that this is the way it needs to be, that the woman's eyes are wide open in sexual attraction, that she's very cognizant of what is going on. You may have even heard that statistic that women are 4 times better than men at reading social cues. You see that represented here symbolically. The woman is quite aware of what's going on early in dating, in sexual attraction. Now, opposites attract. There is a complementarity between these two, a polarity, and that principle runs throughout our studies. Light, dark, conscious, unconscious, yin, yang, the goddess of love, the god of war, death versus life, yin, yang. Men and women are only different in their reptilian brain nature. I shouldn't say men and women, I should say masculine people and feminine people. Those with a polarity in this area of the mind. But in the emotional brain, or mammalian brain, and in the higher brain, or intellectual brain, the genders are essentially the same. We both have anger, we both have sadness, we both have joy, we both have intellectual capacity, we both have language. We're exactly equal, and all of the working parts essentially work the same in those areas, but we are decidedly different instinctually in our unconscious minds. And those of you who are really into Jungian psychology, Carl Jung may attest to that, the differences between the anima and animus, masculine and feminine principles in the unconscious. Okay? So different in the reptilian brain, but the same in the other 2 brains, the mammalian and the higher brain. Without this degree of polarity and intensity between masculinity and femininity, we start out courtship poorly. Okay? This is the first phase, sexual attraction. Without that degree of polarity, we can't move to the second phase. And in that phase, we find love, friendship, and happiness. But a loveless relationship lacks emotional attraction. It lacks friendship. And it lacks value, we're going to learn. If you've ever felt not valued enough, it's because you didn't offer enough friendship or happiness to the other person, or they just weren't capable of receiving it, or receiving your style of conveying it. And that gives you something immediate to do, to wonder, how good of a friend am I? If you feel devalued, or you find you don't value them enough, you may find you don't feel they are being a very good friend to you, and they are not being very loving to you. These being defined as having positive emotions. They're not positive enough for your needs. And then finally, in the third phase of courtship, intellectual attraction, it's about teamwork and commitment, involving patience, persistence, discipline, and other mature virtues that lead to our effectiveness at our efforts toward goals. For us to make it as a couple, we can't just go live in a cave. We have to be out in the world in jobs, maybe raising children, having friends, and living in the world where success and failure do occur. You've heard number one contributor to divorce externally being money, finances, financial failure. Okay, that's an example of where teamwork really matters. So we're going to use a lot of artwork and its symbolism from the masters throughout these programs. This is from Wikimedia Commons, Frank Dixie painting Romeo and Juliet. So I encourage you to be an appreciator of art as we go along and see what you discover in the symbolism about love. Okay, let's let's jump to the steps within the phases, and we're just going to cover, one feature of them, just to whet your appetite and give you a taste of how the specific three steps will work within each of the three phases. 9 steps total to human courtship. I just wanted to throw your way some common experiences people have, though, for us to wonder about as we go. Here's an example. Husband has lost his job. The wife supports him from the heart. She knows she is doing the right thing by her partner, but inexplicably he loses interest in her sexually rather than gaining it for her support. After being so supportive, she feels betrayed. Have you ever heard of that happening? I'll bet you have. Maybe you've lived through it. You're going to find that the answer has to do with the principles of masculinity and femininity. The way masculinity works and the way it is injured by career setbacks. And when it is injured, I guess I'm giving you the answer up front. The way it is injured simply causes the masculinity to decrease. If it decreases, then there is less sexual attraction or interest. That's why. That's what happens. The same is true of the woman. If her femininity is injured in some way, then she loses sexual attraction and interest. But we misinterpret each other. We don't look to the other person and understand that these forces are at work in them. Many of them unconscious, and therefore they can't even explain them to us. They can't put it into words what they're going through. And so we get confused and sometimes hurt by this lack of understanding of the principles of the other gender. Here's another one, a parallel opposite example. The wife has just had a miscarriage, and the husband, while heartbroken, puts his grief aside and tries to do things to cheer her up and support her. He may even dive into work. He does things to make her life more convenient, speaks of the possibility of trying again in the future, lets her know he's always available to talk. But inexplicably, she doesn't want to talk. She talks less and less, finds herself even furious with him for appearing not to understand the gravity of her loss. This now leaves him feeling betrayed, as it does her. This is another misunderstanding. And as a preview, this probably pertains to crossing between two of the areas of the mind, the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain, where he came across to her as insensitive about her natural feelings as a woman regarding this, and he seemed like less of a friend. His efforts at support actually made her unhappy in this instance. She valued him less, felt less like communicating, because you don't talk to people who are not friends. You keep things inside. And then he felt betrayed in the friendship as well. So what's going on? These two couples actually want to support each other, and yet they're incapable of making the other feel better. Okay, this underscores a fundamental principle. Men and women are equal but different. They're different in the passions, different in masculinity and femininity, and the working parts of those, yet they're similar in emotions and intellect. When we don't understand each other intellectually, we might be very different in our unconscious language that is wordless, and that's where all the misunderstanding occurs between the genders. So I think a Rosetta Stone, a key code to getting men and women to understand each other, or masculine people and feminine people to understand each other, is the emotions in what makes you happy or unhappy, because we all feel the same emotions. even if we have different instincts. We could discuss this as a group, but in short, job loss to the man is the man's miscarriage. That's what it feels like to him emotionally. It isn't meant to be literal. It's what the emotions feel like. That could be a joining point between them to understand each other better. What is the commonality between them? It's whatever that emotion is, even though it's about different scenarios. We are going to learn, as we go through all of these courses, we're going to learn about the ancient Greeks, we're going to learn about Shakespeare, and we're going to draw from modern film. I have to thank Amber for the suggestion of the works of Jean Shinoda Bolen, famous psychoanalyst and Jungian and feminist, who wrote Goddesses in Every Woman and Gods in Every Man. I discovered her work late, and it was wonderful to discover because I think similarly. I think she was onto something 30 years ago in considering the Greek gods, the pantheon, the deities, to be key codes to the working parts of these unconscious areas of the mind that we call masculinity and femininity. They're the working principles. So let's stop here to open up the lines, see what you guys think before I go through the 9 steps in brief and we finish up. Anybody out there? Uh-oh.
I'm here too, I just had to unmute it.
Oh, okay. So any comments so far?
I like it so far. I think it's going really well.
Well, thank you. Well, let me give you some of these sort of practical applications just to, again, whet your appetite. We talked about the reptilian brain being about passion and being about sexual attraction and being the first thing that happens between men and women. What if you wanted some instant way of improving at that area? If it's about passion, what's a synonym for passion? Excitement. It's having energy. The phrase joie de vivre, the excitement of being alive. So one way of instantly amplifying your passion and therefore your attractiveness would logically be to be excited about something. Maybe you need to change topics or change activities and be doing something that you genuinely are excited about. You will be more attractive thereby. And a further principle, if that which is impassioning or attractive correlates with your level of being masculine or feminine, the way to instantly boost your feelings of being masculine or being feminine would be to be excited about something. You'll feel more alive, more passion, more masculine or more feminine. And if you do that, you'll be more attractive. Consider that as a tip. Hey, I'm going to need you to, something going on with your phone, I'm going to need you to text. All right. Yeah, text it in. Do the chat box, and I will answer you. How about the opposite of masculinity or femininity? It's the word shame. Shame is the absence or diminishment of masculinity or femininity. It's the diminishment of passion, which is the diminishment of vitality, feelings of being alive. Let's flip that on its end. What's another way of being more passionate, attractive, masculine or feminine. It would be to be the opposite of shameful, which would be shameless. And I mean that in a positive way. I don't mean being rude to people. Being shameless would be similar to being proud in a healthy way. There's a thing called healthy pride. Psychoanalysts talk about a phrase called healthy narcissism. It means normal human pride in real accomplishment, not patting yourself on the back, being good to yourself. So being shameless in that way, you might also say it's similar to being authentic. I think a very overused word these days. Everybody says, be authentic. I think what they're meaning is be shameless, be proud in a healthy way of yourself. Be willing to be your honest self outwardly based on real self-appreciation or accomplishment. That's being shameless. When you do that, you're being more attractive and you're being more passionate for life. You're being more masculine. You're being more feminine when you are shameless. I went through that quickly, but I hope it shows you a little tad of what the usefulness of words can be in your everyday experience when you define them specifically and correlate them to some general principles of love. Now, you could use whatever words you want. You know what they mean to you, so long as we're talking about the same area of the mind. So, shame is the opposite of passion. It's the opposite of feeling masculine or feminine. And so being shameless would flip it back up into being more masculine or more feminine. Be shameless. Okay? Let your mind bake on that a little bit. This also means a derivative principle we could pull from this would then be if you are being shameless and you are being the real you, the bold real you, then you might boldly use man talk or woman talk in the way that feels right and normal and natural for you as a man or you as a woman. Okay? I don't know if you see the potential derogatory, hurtful effects then of using such derogatory terms of generations past, like an old maid, or the more modern confirmed bachelor, or even worse, mansplaining or manspreading. I mean, anytime we use a gender term in a derogatory way like that, we're actually shaming someone else. We are causing them to feel less alive, less vitality. And when you cause somebody to feel less alive, you actually spur them to severe anger, right? Or rage. Because it feels, in their reptilian brain, it feels kind of like a threat to their life. It's a threat to their identity. So isn't that wild how you can just use words to try to understand the principles of what's going on between people? What's another one? How about giving people words of encouragement that speak to their shamelessness? Giving them the stage, really honestly accepting anything they're going to say is going to make them feel more alive, and they will really appreciate you for that, because a main principle of sexual attraction, early dating, and passion itself is going to be that when you amplify the gender instincts of the other person, you make them feel more, quote, feminine or feel more masculine. If you are the source of them feeling that great, that passion, you are wildly attractive. See? Isn't that interesting? Because there's a lot of material out there that encourages both men and women to don't puff up the other person. Don't, quote, you've heard of, don't give them a big head, right? And avoid that. It's, going to be bad for you. Well, is that true? Much of the time, no. Not if it's a person you really want to meet, who's worth meeting, and is a good person. You do want to, quote, puff them up in that area. You want them to feel more passion, more vitality. Okay? So, other questions for us to ask is, how are men and women different in the instincts? We'll learn much more in future courses here. And how can we make use of this polarity to improve our lives? That was one fundamental example I just gave you, that if you make a woman feel more feminine or a man feel more masculine, you become a source of them feeling a boost of passion, which makes you more attractive. And in parallel, what you just did for them by puffing them up, so to speak, you made them feel more attractive as well, and they become more attractive to you. You just gave them a gift of vitality and feeling alive and feeling passion. And in giving them that gift, you just also made yourself much more attractive to them. You benefited them and you benefited yourself with one action. And I think you'll find as we go through, especially the first few courses, that there's a beautiful symmetry between the masculine principle and the feminine principle, masculinity and femininity, in which when the masculine instincts do their thing, it both raises the femininity, well, it raises the masculinity of the man to express them and raises the femininity of the woman simultaneously. Both people get to feel more alive for the interaction. And when a woman expresses her femininity toward the man, it has natural ways of amplifying both her femininity just by expressing it and his masculinity. So we give each other a mutual gift when we are our authentic selves, when we shamelessly, with normal, healthy pride, express who we are, including in our gender, to the other person. It benefits both people. And so we arrive at the first step of courtship, sexual attraction. I'm going to try unmuting Amber. How's that work for you, Amber?
I find my question out just as an example. Do you see it in the text box?
Oh gosh, I'm so sorry that the phone is just, I'm not sure what's going on with the phone quality. If you don't have the computer up and you can't type in the chat box, try texting me your question, and we'll answer it. Or if you get a different phone, that'd be great. Well, let's go through these 9 steps at the giant bird's eye view, the 50,000 foot view, actually, of human courtship. 9 steps. All right. Okay. The first phase is sexual attraction, and it's in this area. Here we go. All right. I have Amber's questions. Oh, shucks. I just deleted the second one. Could you repost it? I'm sorry. Okay. But in sexual attraction, we divide the process of sexual attraction into 3 large steps that couples navigate. The first is called mystery and beauty, beauty and mystery. And it's where masculinity and femininity are conveyed through these 2 most potent initial attractors. The most potent attractor we all know from the advertising world of men is feminine beauty. But that doesn't mean cover model beauty. It means Um, very pure feminine physicality. It could be the way one walks. You might say, we're talking about the reptilian brain, it's the animal instinct area of the mind. So if you think about other species, and we are a species, other species have mating dances where their formerly normal behavior becomes augmented, becomes caricature esque, where it is overly emphasized to attract the mate. Okay, the same is true of the physicality of the female form toward um, those attracted to it. And so it's getting someone's attention. Okay, step one is getting someone else's attention. And beauty and that which is visual very much gets the typical male's attention. If we're talking about a bell curve of males. Okay, so don't see it as cover model beauty, even though I use the word beauty. Um, you might call it just visual. Be visual. Can anyone think of an evolutionary psychology reason that males of a species might be very visual? Anybody on the line? Why might males be visual and pay very close attention to that which is visual?
Trying to pick out the best person to have more children with.
Okay, definitely. I was thinking of the other, part of the picture of passion, which is survival, making sure you stay alive, right? Um, Evolutionary psychologists, people sometimes criticize them or make fun of them and say they're always talking about caveman, cavewoman stuff. But maybe it's a useful analogy. If you think of a caveman, wandering around, there are predators. There's a lot more deadly, predatory threats going on in primitive times, right, than in our civilized world today. So you better have good eyesight. You better be visual, okay? So the very first thing is going to grab the man's attention is that which is visual, um, perhaps for survival reasons. That's what I'm talking about by feminine beauty. I'm talking about what is it that you do physically to get the man's attention. Yes, of course, it might in part be your look, your physical beauty, but it might also be how you walk or convey yourself, or the eyes, the windows to the soul, right? And how romantic is that to gaze in someone's eyes for a little too long? Okay, that's beauty that I'm talking about as well. Now, mystery will go into why that is a potent first attention grabber um, um, and enticement to women to get interest in a man. That will key into what we'll learn later as the Oedipal period of life, Freud's Oedipal model or theory, that a prime feature of her own father was that he was very mysterious. He had mysterious ways about him, did mysterious things. So, mystery and beauty, first step of sexual attraction. Second step, and then I'll get through these first three, and then we'll answer Amber's question. Second step is conveying what the partner might receive as an advantage through being with you. Now, this is an instinctual advantage. This isn't about, oh, you make a lot of money, although that can be instinctual between men and women. It's not about what your degree is or your education or what family you come from. It's unconscious advantage that you just feel it in your bones that being around this other person is going to be good for you, that you will benefit. And I call that ladies and gentlemen. It's a very old concept, acting like a gentleman, acting like a lady. And they used to say that in the entertainment business. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting, our show. Well, it's acting like a gentleman or acting like a lady means, or used to mean, maybe we don't do these anymore at all, but it used to mean really respecting the other person, really respecting the other gender, and recognizing their difference from you, and wanting to give them the gift of who you are in a courteous way. Okay? A translation for these words, ladies and gentlemen, would be displaying your maternal and paternal qualities at the instinctual level. Okay? This is a couple that's gone beyond just a first meet and greet, and they're taking a little more interest in each other. They might be starting to have a conversation and learn a little more about each other, and they might act very diplomatic. And all of you have heard of the concept of being on your best behavior. Like when we first meet new dates, we're on our best behavior. And some people are derogatory about that and say, oh, I was fooled. They were on their best behavior, and then they turned out to be totally different from that. Well, it doesn't have to be this derogatory experience. It's a normal, natural human part of early socializing, early dating, where we display our best traits instinctually that are giving and caring and kind in a uniquely masculine or feminine way. And the best words I can think of to express that is to say maternal or paternal. You'll see couples doing this when on a first date, where the man will act in a protective way physically. He might stand between a woman and the crowd, or where the woman might act maternal in her own way, like giving the man a compliment or telling him he's interesting. And these have echoes in them of, if we had good parents, nice parents, of what our opposite sex parent might have communicated to us or done for us physically. You can imagine a father protecting a daughter physically. You can imagine a mother praising or complimenting a son. Okay? So there are wonderful features to the second step of sexual attraction in numerous ways. For one, it lets us know how we will often be treated, potentially, in the relationship when there is a trade-off of power back and forth. Sometimes the man has a little more power, sometimes the woman has a little more power. Sometimes the man is a little more challenged, sometimes the woman's a little more challenged. So throughout the course of a relationship, we all occasionally lean on each other's shoulder. And you might call that getting a little parenting from the other person, from the partner. Another facet of this might reveal to you how will your children be treated by this person. If you have children together, what are their maternal traits and what are their paternal traits? What is their best suit? What is their best skill? What is their nature in being parental? So you get a little preview of how your offspring might be treated. Okay? So there are all these wonderful uses of this. Now, at street level, this will be experienced by them both as being the time at which there starts to become more physical intimacy. Touch might be established, a handshake, a high five, a pat on the back, the brush of an arm, might occur here, where a first physical contact takes place. And you might imagine that being the case between a mother and son or a father and daughter. Okay, hugging. All right. And, we're never going to get to love if we never even touch. It has to happen at some point in the process of men and women getting together. And this would be the step at which it is most natural and normal and expected and welcomed. Step 3, and then we'll break for Amber's question. Step 3 is testing the man for both masculinity and character and determining which ones are winners versus losers. Testing the man for masculinity and character and determining which ones are winners and which ones are losers. Why testing the man? Well, evolutionary psychologists talk to this in terms of, simply put, comparing numbers of gametes or sex cells for the purpose of survival of the species. That males have billions and billions of sperm over a lifetime. Women have 200 to 300 total viable eggs that could become a baby over the reproductive lifespan. And so, from a statistical genetics reproduction point of view, women have a lot to lose in making the wrong choice in a mate if perchance they become pregnant. If they choose the wrong man, disastrous, potentially, or wonderful, potentially. So the judgment and power rests with them in this phase of courtship. They are the decision makers whether mating takes place. They are the decision makers whether any further advancement of the relationship will occur, whether they will move on to love or not. And so the woman tests the man, or the feminine person tests the masculine person in the relationship. And so it's called winners and losers. And as we will learn in the course about this particular step, called winners and losers, we'll learn the Greek gods that represent the best features of femininity that are good at testing the males, or testing the masculine, which are Athena and Artemis. And as we'll go along and learn, the two general areas of psychology that get tested are the man's more primitive, animalistic, masculine skills and identity. How masculine is he? That's tested by Athena in our model. And his character, his maturity, is tested by Artemis, the Artemis part of a woman's femininity, or what I call the Artemis instinct. Okay, so that's sexual attraction. If the man passes, if he has good masculinity and mature character, she sees him as a winner. And it's not just about her benefiting. He benefits too, because he feels like a winner, because she has chosen him from among the many men. He feels honored. That feels impassioning. That feels masculinizing. And that feels like being alive. She makes him feel alive by choosing him over other men. But he better have the qualities to be worth being chosen. Okay? All right. Let's see Amber's question. Okay. She says, years ago, I went on a few dates with someone that on paper was a man's man. This is great. It directly correlates. He was an orthopedic surgeon in sports medicine at Johns Hopkins. He was very good looking and in great shape. I was not sexually attracted to him, though. Why was this? I couldn't figure it out until I learned your material. It was because when he talked about his career, he didn't seem passionate about it. It didn't matter that he was a surgeon. He just wasn't passionate about it. To say this, I say this to let other men know that just because a man is good on paper, has money, is good looking, doesn't make him sexually attractive. That's amazing. Wow, that's wonderful. That you saw that connection. The difference between looking good on paper and being attractive. Think about it. Looking good on paper means you're in the higher brain. You're in the conscious mind, the intellectual part of the mind that does accounting and adds things up and analyzes things on paper, as opposed to the unconscious mind, living in your own body, feeling in your bones what you feel about this person. That's a wonderful observation. Wow. Okay, let's do another question. Oh yeah, Dean observed that the reason men are visual is because threats. He was making that observation. Okay, yeah. So that's Amber's question. Thank you so much. I'm going to let's see, make sure the phones are still open here. I'm going to make it possible to unmute Dean if he so chooses. Okay. And feel free, Amber, to submit more questions if you want. All right, so that's the first phase of courtship. Let's move to the second phase, steps 4, 5, and 6, emotional attraction. In this area, we're going to learn about the 3 large steps that a couple goes through, not in finding desire and passion, but in finding love and friendship and ultimately happiness. Hopefully, in the end, they feel themselves drawn together, not just because of brief, fickle desire or sexual interest, but through happiness, mutual happiness, and a growth of self-esteem between them. These steps involve what we find in each other, discover in each other. First, we find value in each other. I told you, value that which makes us happy. If you bought a new car and you just love it, it's because it made you happy. It's not just because of the gas mileage, although that might make you happy. If you buy a new shirt and you just love it, it's because it makes you happy. If you make a new friend, it's because they made you happy. And if you stay friends, it's because you continue to stay happy through knowing them. So happiness is what makes things valuable and people valuable. Finding value. Once we do this, we're gonna want to learn how to augment that, how to recognize it, and how to make decisions about it, how to leave behind that which is not valuable to us and in which we are not valued. Step 5, the second step of emotional attraction, is when we find stress in each other. Undoubtedly, we're going to encounter obstacles to happiness together. We don't control the world around us. It impacts us. So how we manage stress are both our own and as a couple, each other's, is going to be crucial to see if we have what it takes to stay together and to remain friends. The 2 negative emotions that are the most pure and that we need to learn how to work with are going to be anger and anxiety. Step 6, finding completion. So we found each other valuable. We encounter stress together and navigate it successfully. And we finally must find a feeling of being complete emotionally with each other. This is where we go beyond just routine friendship to being able to say we have found a best friend in the other person. And this is going to have a lot to do with personality styles, that opposites attract in terms of personality styles. And so for this phase of, or for this step of emotional attraction or friendship, we're going to learn all about a type of personality system that we call the social personality system, which goes back in history and draws from the very first personality system, that of the physician Galen, who had the idea of the four humors. Long disproven to be true that there's black bile and yellow bile flowing through us, or that we are made of earth, air, fire, and water, things like this. But his four types of people and observations of these four types of people, just like our example of Copernicus, we should not throw the, quote, baby out with the bathwater in terms of what was being observed by some of these ancient philosophers and scientists. So we're actually going to use Galen to understand personality today, and we call it the social personality system. From there, we're going to move on to intellectual attraction. And you remember what this final phase of courtship, the third act of the play of our love story, is going to be about is success. Can we truly team up as true partners and reach goals together? Joint goals, but also our personal individual goals. Step 7, the first step of intellectual attraction, these are all easy to state. They're questions. Who am I? Who am I? Mature identity will be what it's all about. You've often heard people say, maybe your grandmother might have said, you can't find love until you know who you are, right? Or you can't find love until you are your best self or your most mature self. She was right. You need to have some basic handling of the skills of personal growth and maturity to qualify for being a teammate or a partner. Practical application, have you ever been flaked on? Have you had someone in your life you say is a total flake, and it was really hard to have a relationship with them because they'd never show up, they'd break their promises, their word was no good, and it was just a nightmare? Well, that's because they weren't ready for any committed relationship, whether they're male or female. They weren't ready because they're, quote, a flake. But what being a flake means from a psychology standpoint is a lack of mature boundaries that cause you to keep your promises and to respect the rights and the resources of others and not waste their time or by breaking promises, or to be honest up front and say you can't team up with them on a thing. So who am I? Mature identity will be what it's all about. And for that step of courtship, it's a massive part of Romantopedia and romantic dynamics, because it's essentially everything we could devise about general personal growth. I mean, it's the works about you as an individual looking inward and working on yourself. So for that, we'll have to cover personal boundaries, mindfulness or observing ego, your cognitive style. Are you more a left brain person or right brain person? Your ethics or morality, your sense of right and wrong, your intuition and ability to read environments and, be wise and smart about things. And how all of these things come together in such ways as politics, courtesy, discipline, and what amount to, back to Aristotle, what Aristotle called the virtues, a concern of the early philosophers. What is a good person? What is a virtuous person? And what are the virtues? So you've heard of these things before, the virtues like courage, fortitude, strength. All of these things actually are keywords that you see commonly today in the area of psychology called positive psychology, they pursue virtues. These are all features of maturity. A Freudian concept is called the ego defenses. And so we're going to go through all the ego defenses or defense mechanisms for you to understand these universal kinds of virtues. And they range from immature to mature. Humor actually is a high virtue, believe it or not. Humor. So how to cultivate virtue in yourself is essentially step 7, personal growth. Step 8 will be not who am I, but who are we? If we're both mature people, and that means we're capable of a commitment or a partnership, how do we combine together? Compatibility of our character. When we were learning about personality styles in step 6 and finding a best friend through compatible personalities, we're shifting gears here. We're now finding compatible character. In other words, this gets more to the old-fashioned style dating sites, where people would compare interests. Do we like the same music? Do we like the same politics? Are we from the same religion? Are we the same? Do we share common interests and goals and so forth? Are we compatible with our conscious mind's goals and the features of who we are? There's a ton to learn about this. And in past renditions of these principles and this algorithm, I did not have things nearly as advanced as this is now. In fact, I'd like to kind of preview just a phrase for you to wonder about. I think you'll love it when you get to it. I call it two-factor authentication. You're just going to love this when you get to it. Two-factor authentication is going to be where in this step 8, we must determine our nature as a couple will be a combination of 4 skills of commitment and teamwork with 4 commonalities of are we compatible with each other. 4 skills and 4 commonalities. I'll give you one example of a commonality. That we have similar IQ, that we are similar in intelligence level. People that aren't of fairly similar intelligence level have a really hard time getting along because even though they're both awake, aware, communicating, they just don't get each other. They're not on the same wavelength. And so when they try to set goals together, it just is not going to make sense to either of them. They have to have that commonality of what is their IQ level. That's an example of a commonality. An example of a skill, obvious one, is communication. And I call these the 4 C's. We'll learn about them once we get there. Curiosity, communication, compromise, and collaboration. These are the 4 grand skills of commitment. So a couple is going to mix and match in these 2 areas, skills and commonalities. 4 times 4 makes 16. So there will be 16 characteristic virtues or strengths in which the couples might align. And if they align in the right way, it's like puzzle pieces fitting together. That's why I call it two-factor authentication. Okay, making sure that you have found the one in terms of who they are as a person. And finally, the last step of human courtship. Where are we going? We know who am I? We know who are we? Are we compatible? And now, where are we going? It's time to take all that we have shared and actually start doing things, start pursuing our goals. Goals that we come up with together, as well as not forsaking our childhood dreams, not forsaking our very personal, private goals. And so much of this very last step of intellectual attraction or commitment is going to pertain to how to strike a balance between that which is shared in the relationship with that is still private and personal. And that'll be the end of one cycle. And at that step, we will jump all the way back to sexual attraction yet again. As we all know, deep into a long-term commitment, the sex life can diminish, and it needs to be refurbished and maintained. And so this 9-step process isn't just linear, it's circular. Just like the hero's journey, it doubles back on itself to the beginning for maintenance of all the above. I'm going to double check for questions here. Okay, good. Oh, phone should work. Let's see. All right. Try again. Unmute. Still there, Amber?
I'm here.
All right. Your phone works. So,
And just,
go.
I typed a question and submitted it just now.
Oh, okay. Well, with you on the line, I'll read it. And then we're gonna breeze through the 9 steps one more time, just for a quick sentence about each, a quick tip. But let's see your questions here. All right. Aha, there it is. Okay. I dated someone for 3 years, from 18 to 21 years old. There was a strong sexual attraction, and we were best friends. Everything matched up. Toward the end, I felt a sense of quiet desperation, though, because we did not have a spiritual attraction. I would want to talk about deep topics. He wasn't interested. I also wanted to have an adventurous life of uncertainty and move around. He was satisfied with a house, white picket fence, and 3 kids type of future. When I got older, I realized that was okay. It's not that he didn't want to. It's because he didn't have the capacity. We broke up 10 years ago. I talked to him last night on the phone because we remained friends. We still joke around and have fun talking. I tried to bring up a deep topic, and he didn't have much to comment. Even though he is educated, it confirmed that we did not have intellectual attraction. That's a great example. As we rise up through these 3 brains, we go from more primitive to more advanced and more mature. And it's a wonderful parallel. We go from early dating, just meeting, all the way up to marriage, if you so choose. And marriage doesn't have to be the end point. The real psychological state we would call commitment. It would be truly being committed to another person. But notice that we go from primitive to mature, from just having met all the way up to marriage. So as we rise up through these phases in our love lives and through our love story, we're called upon to develop more and more maturity and more, you might say, consciousness. Well, once we're to this higher brained area, the circuitry, if you will, is way more complex. There are way more working parts, if you will, and so there's much more to talk about. But what I've done is I've tried to summarize things and link them together in very simple but sophisticated ways. And this example I just gave you of 2-factor authentication is probably going to be the area of study of this material to answer your question about this guy, that he didn't appreciate the specific aspects of you that are being a deep thinker. It doesn't make him immature or you immature. It just makes you not have that in common, and uh, just not therefore capable of fully being partners because of it. Yours is a very common and yet complex way of saying all that. That there was just something that bothered you about him. You know, a lot of people in relationships will say, "Yeah, I was with them, but you said this actually. You said I wasn't spiritually complete with him. There's something missing. I felt a little twinge of something's not quite right here, but I can't put a finger on it." People will say, this is what they're talking about. It's that there's a feature of the other person's identity or character that is contrary to you achieving your personal goals or just things you enjoy about life. It'll get in the way, and it's beyond just a minor nuisance, because none of us are perfect. We're going to accept certain nuisances and certain things that are in our way, and we work around them and we find harmony somehow. But some things you might call a deal breaker, even if it seems like a small thing. Um, One example quickly from my life was I once dated a European national long ago, and I thought it was enticing and interesting and alluring, the foreignness of her language and her culture and so forth. It was very interesting. I learned a lot and very enjoyable. But toward the end of the relationship, there was a time when I made a cultural reference to a cartoon of my childhood, and she had no idea what I was talking about. And on a conscious level, well, why would she know about it? You know, it's a tiny little piece of American culture. It's silly. But, and, you know, forgive that, right? It's no big deal. But it was a spark that ignited in me an understanding of the gap of cultural difference. So what was very alluring and appealing early on, the cultural differences, late in the relationship when it's time to see if you can do it for life, be as partners for life, actually the differences become a liability sometimes, where you can't see yourself accomplishing what you need to. So that was a little clue to me. And that's probably what you saw in this guy when he did not appreciate your depth as a person. It just, yeah.
I will. Can you hear me, Dr. Paul?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I will also add something. I've seen people in similar situations to the example I just gave you, and a couple will have strong sexual and emotional attraction, but not a spiritual attraction or an intellectual attraction, and someone, one of them will have an.
So here we are. Do you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. So 9 steps, 3 phases. Back to the beginning. Sexual attraction. Step 1 is beauty and mystery. The woman being visually appealing toward the man, or grabbing his attention visually, and the man being mysterious. The man being mysterious. This is the most powerful set of attractors between the genders, and it's what truly gets things started. It's what makes you decide to unconsciously, it makes you instinctually gravitate toward one person over another in the vicinity. Okay? So things that men can learn to be more mysterious, and things that women can learn to be more visual and attention grabbing in a visual way, will help them get more attention. So notice when you first meet someone that these are the most potent thing that captures your attention or captures their attention. So this is an easy exercise. This is for men to wonder what can they do to cause curiosity to come out in a woman. So the quick tip for men about knowing that you're doing step one right is if the woman asks you a lot of questions. Another way to
Or
know,
if a woman says that you're weird.
oh yeah, another way is if a woman labels you. If the woman is trying to label you or your behavior, then you're being mysterious because labeling things helps us demystify them. So that's what she's doing. She's trying to get control and power in a good way. She's trying to master the mysteriousness about you. And it will parallel how a daughter would have tried to um, grapple with the nature of her own father, to try to understand him and pierce the veil of his mysteriousness. So notice this, and uh, what can women do as far as knowing that they're doing it right? Well, that's very easy. Is he looking at you? Is he looking at you? So do you have his eye contact? Is how you know you are being visual. That's an easy one. The hard part for women can be, as we've observed, that men are as much as 4 times worse than women at recognizing visual, or not visual, recognizing social cues. In other words, men are thick. You may need to, maybe this is why the species do this, why it's caricature-ish, um, augmented gestures so that you can't miss it to get the male's attention. Okay? But if you have eye contact, then you're doing this right. Step two of sexual attraction, conveying what the partner might receive as an advantage in being with you, called ladies and gentlemen, or it's being maternal and being paternal. Notice that after two people start to converse, they're on their best behavior. Well, now you can see this is very useful and normal. It's an advertisement of what good things might be in store if you become a couple. And it further amplifies the masculinity and femininity in each other. In other words, the excitement, the passion, the interest um, of being together when you are maternal or paternal toward the opposite gender. Handy tip might be for you to notice in other couples how they are behaving. You'll be able to spot them being at this step when you see the male doing fatherly or paternal things, like going and doing chores for the woman or taking care of her, or what your grandpa maybe did, hold the door open for the woman. What would a father do for a daughter is what you might see. And what might a mother do for a son? How might she talk to him, look at him, bat her eyes at him, smile at him? What might a mother do to a son? If you want to get better at this step and at recognizing it, you might imagine how would a good father treat a daughter and how would a good mother treat a son? And if you find adult analogies to those kinds of hugging, caring, supportive, interested, generous natures in our parents and apply them in some kind of practical way to your adult life now, you'll get better at this step. Now, a lot of people are just already really good at this step. Our society, to some degree, at least until recent decades, has condoned it. Being courteous to each other and good and generous and giving to each other has been condoned. Thus the phrase, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to present our show. Be sure to be on courteous, good behavior with each other. But in some ways this might be, getting confused these days in our sociology. People can take offense actually to being treated nicely in this way for some reason. People can feel like, no, no, you should never be giving. You should never be generous. You'll get taken advantage of. So many people have such pain and hurt from past relationships and maybe even past cultural norms that they become stingy with each other. Make sure you have a good line on a good person. At least you suspect they're a good person, a nice person, and you'll be making a good bet for you to be generous, at least briefly, to a person to see how things go along between you. So, ladies and gentlemen, being maternal and paternal. Oh, by the way, that step also is the step where, for things to feel normal and natural, you probably will have commenced some kind of touch, some kind of physical contact, like, a handshake or a pat on the shoulder, that you really you're really starting to like each other. Okay?
Submission signal.
Pardon?
Submission signal.
Yeah, in the ethology animal world, they use a phrase, submission signals. I like to call them attraction signals. There are certain things that men do and women do in their posture and their physicality to give off symbols and clues to the other person that they are liked. So thank you for reminding me of that. That something about our physicality and our conversation will be making it clear to the other person that we like them. That this is the step where you first realize, aha, yes, they do like me, and where you let them know you like them, maybe, probably non-verbally. Again, we're in the reptilian brain. It's non-verbal, it's physical, it's body-based. So this is where we let each other know we like each other through our physicality. Step 3, where the woman tests the man for both masculinity and character, where there are winners and losers. And as we've said, the woman has a great deal to lose in early dating by choosing the wrong man. The man needs to rise to the occasion in competition with other men over these two items, his character and his masculinity. So anytime in early dating where you see competitiveness, territoriality, jealousy of some type, okay, and competition, you're probably in step 3 of sexual attraction. And why does it matter knowing what step you're in? Because generally on a bell curve of progress, one step comes before the next. So you kind of know where you are in how you're doing with building the relationship. Okay? So it's not always exactly the case. It's worth noting that this is like a template to fill in where all the boxes need to be checked or you're not done yet. But that's what's going on. Now we've crossed from sexual attraction into friendship and love, emotional attraction. So step 4 is where we find value in each other. To have actual love, we need happiness, which is synonymous with high self-esteem, mutual value, and friendship. If we don't value the other person or feel valued ourselves, we ought to not form a friendship or love with that person. If we do have a green light, then we ought to get to practicing good skills of friendship in general. So in this step, we learn a lot about what is friendship, and therefore what is love. And it's mutual happiness. It's mutual raising of self-esteem, of which there are 2 working parts we're going to learn about. There's well-being and there's confidence. And we're going to learn about how to augment those. For our purposes, the easy take-home principle about step 4 is, does being around this new person make you feel happy? If not, then either they're not a good match for you as a friend, or they're not friendly in general, or you're not. And this is where being aware of our mood states can matter. Being depressed is not friendly. Being fearful is also not friendly. So being depressed or fearful takes away from the friendship we share, and therefore from the love. So I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news. If you get depressed, you're not very lovable or loving at that point. And you ought to do what you can to start getting out of it. But not get offended when in the state of your depression or fear or anxiety, if it's prolonged, that the other person stops valuing you as much and starts losing interest. It's not their fault. It's normal and natural. That we can only stay together by having love, which means being happy together. Step 5, right in the middle of the whole system, finding stress in each other. We can expect obstacles in our way, and when we encounter obstacles, they will cause stress. And stress is composed of either hurt or loss, which we're going to learn about, which if we let them into us, cause anger and anxiety. So we shouldn't expect friendship, happiness, and being in love to never have obstacles. There will be. And these are going to risk our self-esteem and therefore how much we are valued and how much we value each other. So we're going to learn all about the anger map and the anxiety map. The anger map is kind of like a treasure map, and the anxiety map is a little more like a fire rescue map, how to get out of the building. And the anger map is like finding where the treasure is. And these two kinds of maps, we're going to learn about how they guide us to defeat anger and anxiety, the two major emotional obstacles that come our way, using twin virtues called assertiveness and courage. If we cultivate those two things, we will be very skilled automatically as friends, as having friendship skill, and therefore the ability to make other people happy by first being happy ourselves. The reward we get from these virtues of assertiveness and courage are well-being and confidence. Those are the two forms of self-esteem, which is what causes us to be valued and to be loving and lovable by others, and to feel happy and share friendship. Step 6, the final step of emotional attraction or love, will be finding completion in each other, going beyond just regular old friendship to best friendship, finding somebody with a personality style that is just very different from everyone else we've met and probably will be our opposite in style. So bridging this gap from just being friends and sharing love to actually forming a long-term partnership and being teammates is a big jump. So we better be with a best friend, not just a routine friend or a fair weather friend. And that will then take us to our third phase of courtship. So what we find here is essentially what has been called a soulmate, somebody who is our personality opposite, and our social personality system helps you to decode who those people are and who you are. Opposites attract in this way. So now we're ready to move on to actual commitment, teamwork, and partnership, getting to our goals, and that's intellectual attraction. So step 7 is first starting with who am I, developing your identity as a person and your personal growth. Nobody's ready for a true commitment until we've done our part in our own personal growth toward our highest character. And the two working parts that are maybe most responsible for what we would call maturity are our boundaries and our observing ego or mindfulness, our ability to take a time out, think about things before making a decision, to be mindful. So those two things alone give you the most advances in your maturity level. So the two tips you could take away from step 7 to cultivate it would be boundaries are all about saying no. So start practicing with the word no in your life. See where it appears and why and when. When do you feel like saying no, but then you don't? When do other people tell you no? And how does that make you feel when they do? Do you do the opposite too much? Say yes to everything to your detriment? Do you find yourself not as interested in other people who say yes to everything? Or give you a sense you don't really have a sense of who they are because they just say yes to everything. So how do we know who they even are if they don't say no to anything? Okay? That's some boundary practice. Notice the word no in your life versus yes, and it'll tell you something about how your boundaries function. The answer is they ought to sometimes say yes and sometimes say no, according to what's right for you and what you like and believe in and what makes you feel good and what makes you successful. Observing ego, mindfulness, you can achieve that through some specific means. Using your 5 senses, sharing a meal with another person, any intimate connection to another person, meditation, prayer, anything that gets you thinking about yourself and your life. A journal would do it. And observing ego, since we've talked all about storytelling and drama, observing ego is the closest thing to a novel's narrator. It's like you being the narrator of your own life, as if you were watching a movie about your life and you heard your voice describing what's happening, what's playing out. Step 8, who are we? Together, compatibility of character. And this is where we find we have both the skills and commonalities necessary for teamwork. The 4 skills of commitment and the 4 commonalities of commitment, I call them. Multiplied together, it makes 16 possible combinations of people in commitment. And I call it 2-factor authentication between your skills and your commonalities to be sure that you're sure you have the right person. Just like Amber's example of the man who didn't really appreciate her depth. That wasn't the right combination. He didn't appreciate her philosophical nature. And once we have done this personal growth, we were ready to pull the trigger on being a couple and go long term. And we are certain that we have compatible character where we're going to fill in our weaknesses with the other person's strength. Not just about the emotions and self-esteem that we see in personality styles, but about the details of life. That the story just sounds right between us. Things just flow naturally. It's easy, you know? When people notice their relationships are hard, they're probably impaired in this step. And when the relationship just goes easily and it flows, they probably are aligned well in this step. What we arrive at the end of this step is what we're going to call the golden virtue in the partner. It's kind of a summation of all of their best virtues. And a special preview, it's going to be the best things about our opposite sex parent. It's going to be the best things about mom if you're a man, or the best things about dad if you're a woman. That'll be our partner's golden virtue. And we will end with, where are we going? Joint life's goals in pursuing success together while not forsaking our own private goals. We're going to have all the skills, compatibility, and resources we need to reach life's joint goals together, but also our individual personal life goals. And we need to be able to strike a balance in the end between what is shared and what is private, and find that there is actually a balance between the two. and that we can get both our joint shared goals and our individual personal goals if we have found the right person. So this is where you actually make things happen and double back to maintenance it all, back to the beginning, to remembering masculinity and femininity and remembering to encourage those in our mate. The cycle continues. So thank you guys.